Yeah, I'm giving them to everybody, but I'm out. Box.
Good afternoon. Oh, excellent. Is it working or no? I can't actually. Sounds okay? Works? Yes. All right. This is the Sidrops meeting at IETF 101. If somebody could reach back and close the door, that would be great. Thank you very much. I'm Chris. This is Kayer.
Hi, guys.
Quickly about the mics. Please talk into the mic. Don't talk like this. Don't gradually get a whole bunch louder and scare people in the room. Can you not hear me regularly? Maybe it's... Okay, sorry. Anyway, you can put the mic on the thing here. You can hold it in your hand. There's a clicker for the presenters. I'll have a clock that'll go and give you the 2-minute warning by being super loud. Now we move forward. 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 Oh, wait, I know what it is.
Yeah.
No, focus Paul's mouse. Wait, focus Paul's mouse.
No.
That'll work. Okay. There's a note well. I'm sure you've seen it at least once on this trip already. Quickly read it. I'll make it smaller next time. We have an agenda. I think there's one item we want to add to the very end, or want to request to add at the very end, and that's to chat just really quickly about protocol level security stuff. Jeff Haas gave a presentation at the IEPG, which you can get from iepg.org to see, but basically it talks about some standards to be sort of standard written down, like if you want to do this or this or this with your protocol, here's the options you have for securing it, for identification, for cryptographic, for confidentiality, and that's the only two I care about right now. So that's that. We can talk about at the very end if there's time. Otherwise, we need to find a JabberScribe and a notes taker. We have to stop here until we find them. JabberScribe? Hands up. You can go home. I'll stop the bus. JabberScribe? Great. JabberScribe. Now, notes taker. Notes. Somebody want to write? The writing notes part is easy. You can do it in whatever application you like that takes text, and then email to the chairs at the end. If you like using the Etherpad thingy on the data tracker, you could do that. Not my first choice, but notes. Jeff wants to take notes.
You said no one takes notes, we'll go.
Damn it. That's the problem with the ultimatum. I'm going to be the worst parent ever and not follow through. Notes? Jeff?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. It's all about finding a compromise, just like with kids. Okay. So I think we'll flip right quickly through the status of all these things. These are the drafts. You can get all this content off of the data tracker, the materials link for the meeting. All these are just what's on the drafts page on tools. Does anybody have any questions about the current set of status other than LTA use cases, which is probably my fault, which I'll fix after the meeting? Should be working group last call.
Yes. Tim Ruijs from MCC. I had a question about RPI3 validation last call, because I think the last call went out, but I'm not sure whether it is.
That's probably also something I'll fix after this.
So,
Tree validation. As always, if I'm messing up, you should speak up. I think the only thing we have that's currently pending all of the other things is the stuff in the editor queue for BGP-Sec rollover. That's just waiting on editor doing stuff, I think. No questions? Presentations. Okay. Daniel, where are you? Sweet. It's not Daniel. It's Harris. Great. Awesome. Here you go. Here's your clicker. You can use the thing. I'll get your slides up.
So this is next week's.
Yes. Yeah. But I have to. Damn it. It's the wrong window. Still with the wrong window. Come on.
Testing.
It's right there. Correct.
Over. Go. Is that the right colors? Let's hope. All right. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not Daniel Kopp. I'm Aris Lambrianidis from AMSEX. I'm doing the presentation of behalf of the authors, simply because I had a glass of wine and I can take comments now. So I'll try to be succinct here. I'll try to explain what the problems are that we're trying to solve. The draft here is about trying to ease clients into the world of RPKI. So basically, mostly in shared mediums like IXPs, for which the draft was originally intended, we might be running into the issue of people not wanting to run RPKI for whatever political, technical, or business reason. So what we try to do here is to translate RPKI into a community and send it over through, for example, IXP route server. That's the first goal. The second one is to standardize the already ongoing process of what we've seen has been going on in the market, which is IXPs trying to communicate that kind of information to their clients. So instead of having fragmentation and everyone doing their own thing in a segmented way, we just want to standardize and consolidate into a single community. So a family-friendly diagram here. We have, for example, ASD that is advertising the prefix, any prefix into a route server. The route server does stuff to it. Maybe it drops it. In any case, it would tag it. And depending on its configuration, it would then forward it to the other peers. Do note that this is the same case as for non-IXP environments. It's just that the use case here is prominently for IXPs. The history here, unfortunately, is not accurate, but the key takeaways is to say that the most important updates for the draft have been to incorporate feedback with regards to generalizing the draft to BGP speakers instead of just IXP route servers, and then also reusing the 4-octet extended BGP community with an additional code point that I'll describe later on. This is the encoding here. Basically, the salient points are that the validation state is the last octet, which basically is either 1, 0, 1, or 2. So it's either valid, unknown, or invalid. And then we're going to be requesting a specific code point for the subtype. By the way, something that I forgot is that the signaling AS, which is in our case the IXP route server, is going to be on the global administrator field. Then we have basically described 3 modes of operation. The simplest one being that we simply tag prefixes and then send them over to peers. So this is identical to how normal route servers operate, with the extra addition that those prefixes are being tagged according to their royal validity status. The second mode is to drop invalids and tag the rest. And the third one is drop invalids and unknown. There have been some concerns about path hiding. I think that RFC 17947 basically addresses most, if not all, of these concerns. So there's nothing new under the sun here. If people filter out ROAs before they do the BGP best path selection, then everything works pretty fine. And that's, again, something that they can opt to. If they don't want to, they can also drop them and err in the side of security instead of availability, let's say. Lastly, because there has been some contentious discourse in the mailing list about this, we feel that it makes more sense to just stick on the technical side of things, describe a way of how people can implement it for their own environment, whether that's a business one, a research one, or whatever. And then for any other issues, security concerns, or anything else, it's probably a better idea to have an extra draft with more examples and more detail. And I think that's basically it. So at this point, I would be interested in questions.
I got there first. Job Snyders, NTT Communications. Through a series of trick questions, I would like to see if we can establish a better understanding of the proposed morphology. Does the IPv4 prefix 80.249.208.0/21 ring any bells for you?
Yeah, that's the AMSX peering LAN.
And you would agree that if a /22, or more specific, would be propagated through the default free zone, it would be very unfortunate.
For the most part, yes. Depends on the configuration of the directly configured peers.
But yeah, so many IXP peering LAN participants, their sessions would drop because the more specific route wins the BGP control plane traffic.
But that depends on their configuration as well.
So if I would receive this /22 from a peering partner or a customer that somehow managed to sneak through my IRR-based filters, and I then propagate it onwards to you, to my other peers, to other customers, but clearly mark it with a BGP community, I feel that none of us are getting any benefit from the ROA that exists for this specific prefix. And my main obstacle with this draft is that if there is poisonous information, any BGP speaking entity that knows that it is poisonous information, because the route server in this draft is aware of the validation state, should not mark it with a community and distribute it, thereby amplifying the problem. It should always be encouraged to drop the invalids.
Can I comment on this?
Yeah, of course.
So I'm inclined to agree, but I would also say, firstly, that it depends on the environments, because this draft could still be applicable to research environments that are not connected to the internet at all, for example. And secondly, because it could be, and it is a large discussion, it's probably a good idea to have it as a different draft. So if we're talking about best operational practices, let's just make another draft.
I'm aware of the trick to deflect criticism to separate drafts. I've used it myself a few times, but I don't think we can use that card here. But on the technical side,
It's not a trick.
There are two concerns related specifically to using BGP communities. One is the timeline of deploying a new extended community. Not all implementations allow you to just put in hexadecimals and go with it. Many implementations require that there is a form of support. So even if you standardize today and implementations happen in the next 18 months, then deployment happens in the 18 months after that. Use large BGP communities deployment cycle as an example of how long these things take, even at full speed. Realistically, this then becomes in the hands of end users 4 years from now. And I hope that 4 years from now, we've made way more headway regarding RPKI origin validation than this draft proposes.
Well, but we could also say the same thing 4 years ago. and we didn't.
But we didn't.
Exactly. So we cannot have any guarantees to that. What I can guarantee you is that if we don't standardize, which is one of the goals on this thing, 4 years down the road, we're going to be having we're going to be having 50, 80, 100 XPs doing their own thing, which is a nightmare for customers.
Well,
Not necessary.
Okay.
last
But that's
comment, last comment from my side.
Okay.
I also feel it has not been sufficiently justified why locally significant communities, namely using the ASN of the route server and just documenting this community means that the route server made this observation, why that is insufficient and why it has to be an extended community. Because right now, I believe your organization has the capability to tag the announcements.
Correct.
And you publicly document 6667:123 means A and :1234 means B.
Correct.
Why is that not sufficient?
The answer to that is because the weight of what we're saying in our own website is not the same as that to an RFC.
Yep.
Alexander Azimov, Curate Labs. I have a more general question. So, IRA filters and RPKI are both methods to filter out invalid routes. And authors are representing huge IXs that have already implemented IRA filters. So you can't say that you are not working with routes, you are just sending them in all directions and so on. So my question is, if we have two methods that have the same goal, why do you trying to treat them differently?
You mean IRR filtering and RPKI filtering?
Yeah. So
For example,
you may also tag your prefixes that are invalid according to IRR and send it to your customers. So why in this situation you are do it that way, and why in another situation you do it another way?
that's a very good question. My personal opinion to that is because RPKI generally has a more solid foundation in terms of standardization compared to IRR. So IRR filtering is already problematic as it is, based on the fact that people are already doing it way too fragmented. But it could be the case that we might address this in a different draft as well. So
my idea was different. So it's that you should treat them both in the same way. Yes, it is correct, but you should filter them both out. So the second question, okay, let's imagine that you've managed to make this draft adopted and it became an RFC. Do you really believe that your customers, majority of your customers, will be using such a community to do to trick the BGP decision process? It's from my perspective, it is I don't think it will be.
Our customers are already doing that. The difference
the
is
majority of your customers.
no, but customers are already doing that. So the problem here to solve is whether we standardize this thing across more IXs.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. I failed to provide a draft and presentations on ideas how to use the expanded general community code space that we have. That expanded code space quite clearly allows for, say, having EuroIX as a coordination of the IXP operators, acquiring an AS number that could be used to publish the common repertoire suggested by EuroIX as common semantics communities. And maybe the Asian IX operators are lazy and would just say, well, okay, for our customers, we are pointing to that same registry. There are quite definitely now easy ways. And yes, it would be really good to have a draft and finally an informational or BCP RFC that explains a common way of doing this. And the benefits would be, as Job was pointing out, deployment of new routing repertoire becomes much more agile than with the old extended communities. There is also another benefit when you use the regular open community attribute, and that means that not only one does not have to wait until the router vendors provide the new software version that understands and implements the semantics, potentially, of the thing. It also means that as far as control of propagation of signals can be implemented by operators, that's easy with standard communities. It is absolutely not possible with extended communities as long as not everybody actually has the implementation of that. And I think that's, in the case of a security relevant signaling, a very, very important point. And I actually have a question for you.
Can I just comment before the
Yeah, okay,
question?
go ahead.
So why just limit it though only on internet exchanges? So if
The association of dog owners, of course, can get an AS number for their code point of
Okay.
marking dog shit. Huh?
okay,
The question that
I have an idea as to the name of that community, IETF.
Just want to make the point that we are now
running out of time.
3 or 4 minutes into Sriran's time. So get to the point quickly, answer it quickly, so we get Sriran up.
Yeah, that question. You still need to?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because I didn't see it.
as you are an IXP who is supposed to already or soon use that kind of stuff, my question would be, and that's not really protocol stuff, which trust anchors are you actually using? And are you sure, have you checked that all the things that you are doing don't have bad consequences outside of just routing?
No, we're not, but we leave that decision to the customers.
If you do not specify which trust anchors are used for coming to a designation there, the customer has to rely on the set of trust anchors that you are using.
Rudiger, this is a great conversation. We probably should take it to the mailing list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Montgomery, I had just a quick question about scope. So, and I don't know what the answer is about encoding external attributes. All that conversation is good. But that seemed to be the only thing that this draft added. All of these descriptions of simple tagging, dropping and tagging, strict dropping and tagging, you can do now. You just put names on them, right?
Yes, but you also need to standardize. So you need to make sure that every operator who implements this implements one of the 3 modes of operation instead of 10, 15, or whatever. So you need to use a common language across operators who do that.
That's not clear to me. And one other thing I wanted to ask is, there's lines in here like a validating BGP speaker must support at least the simple tagging operation. When it says a validating BGP speaker, do you mean a speaker that implements this spec?
Correct.
Or just a normal RPKI validating BGP engine?
I mean to say the peer who is doing the validation and sends it out as in tag form to its peers.
I can't tell whether this said that every BGP speaker has to be able to do this, or if you're doing this mechanism, then you have to implement one form.
If it's in an
It's about
if
scope.
it's in an internet exchange, it's only the route server. Does that answer your question?
Oh, take it up offline. It's about
Okay.
the-
Yeah. We'll be over time.
Yeah,
Thank you
please.
so much.
Thank you very much. There's a bunch of conversation here. All of it should be on the mailing list, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Sriram, and my co-authors on this are Oliver Borchert, Doug, and Job. So this is about trying to be, you'll see. We don't want to go to, in the case, we don't want to immediately go to dropping invalids, rather have some intermediate transition period where we are trying to route them towards their less specifics, and at the same time truly drop the invalids, but try to route them to their less specifics. Let's get into that. So valid obviously raises no concerns, not found, not penalized during partial deployment. So the question is about the invalid. So should we always drop invalid? The answer is perhaps not, because network operators would like reachability not to be compromised during incremental deployment or transient conditions. Unconditionally dropping invalid, that we could do only in mature state of RPKI deployment. So the next question is, during incremental deployment state, should we drop invalid route only if a less specific route exists that is either valid or not found? So we call that the DISR or DISR policy. This is exactly that, drop invalid if a valid or not found less specific route exists. So why do we want to do that? So if there's a ROA for the subsuming less specific that exists, right. So essentially the idea is that that you are dropping the invalids and you are routing them towards a less specific that is either valid or not found. And by doing this, the invalid announcements, all of them are dropped. Some of them could be hijacks, some of them could be due to traffic engineering. But what we are trying to ensure in the process is that the traffic for the more specific does get to the destination it is supposed to reach. So let's look at some scenarios whether or not that truly happens. The colors kind of changed here. The blue, what you see blue is was yellow in my slides. So I wonder what happened to the red. The red became pink. Okay. Oh, did you just fix it? Oh, that's good. Okay. So in this case, there are no ROAs. So the scenario is AS1 is originating /22. Out of it, it also originates a /24 to a different transit provider. In this case, all of these, and there's a hijack at the top coming from AS5. So there's traffic engineering of the more specific. There's also a hijack of the more specific, and the less specific is making its way as well to the AS4. So sitting at AS4, these are all not found. And we are not really differentiating in this case. They are all in the same status. So now we look at a situation where ROAs come into play. So there's a ROA for the /22, which makes the more specific invalid. The traffic engineering intended one, as well as the real hijacked one. So AS4 applies the DISR policy, and it drops all the invalids that it sees with the more specifics, and routes that, and because it sees that the less specific invalid or not found, in this case, I'm sorry, the less specific valid is covering the more specific invalid, so it routes the traffic to the less specific. So traffic engineering doesn't work as intended, but the traffic gets to its intended destination. Same thing happens if there is a ROA in between. The ROA was not created for the /22, but it was created for a 23, which makes the /22 not found as opposed to valid. So, but AS4 decides to choose that and route the traffic to the not found rather than the invalids. So again, drops the invalids and the traffic still gets to the correct destination. In this case, the less specifics are being aggregated by AS2, and the ROA has been created for the /23, the aggregation. The hijack is caught and dropped. The traffic definitely reaches the less specific through AS2, the more specific through AS2. No problem there. So in this scenario, there's multi-homing. Previous one didn't have multi-homing. So when you have multi-homing, now yes, the traffic engineering, the more specific intended for traffic engineering is invalid, as well as the real hijack is invalid. Both are dropped, and the traffic is routed to the less specific, and AS2 is able to distribute the traffic to the more specifics underneath it. Jeff had pointed out an interesting situation where there seems to be something to be a little concerned about with this DISR policy. So here in this picture, the /24 more specific was a customer of AS2, and then it ran away with the more specific, with the sub allocation, and now it homes to AS3. So now the DISR policy would, so there's the AS2 ISP2 has created a ROA for the /26, I'm sorry, /16. What happens is that AS4 selects the less specific /16. And what you see happening in this picture is that, yes, indeed, the /24 traffic goes to AS2, but it has nothing to deliver to because the customer has moved away. So the customer basically experiences unreachability. So should we be, the question is, so it's a non-paying customer who has stolen a sub-allocation and ran away with it. So should ISP2 decide that it should be punished for that reason and suffer non-reachability? Or should ISP have some concern or compassion? And based on that, if they do have some soft corner, thinking that maybe the check is in the mail or something like that, they can go ahead and create a ROA for the more specific. So that is one option that ISP2 has in case they want to be soft towards this customer for a grace period. All right. So we have looked at what are the implications of this policy. I mean, is it helping in terms of looking at real route views and ROA data? So at the top, we are looking like from 7 route views collectors, we are looking at 750,000 routes, of which close to 60,000 are valid, 10,000 are invalid, and the rest are not found. And then further, we can differentiate the invalids based on max length, max length mismatch, AS mismatch, both max length and AS mismatch, and AS set. So let's take a look at the invalids, 10,000 of them. Of those, max length invalid are about 7,000, AS invalid about 3,000, max length and AS, and both AS and max length invalid a small number. And here we drill down, look at the max length invalid, and ask the question: is there a valid or not found less specific to which it can be routed, or not less specific or equally or the same prefix? So certainly, like in 68,000 out of 6,800, 6,000 roughly are routable to a valid or not found. And then the next question is, of those, how many have the same origin AS and how many have a different origin AS? So as expected, about 6,000, almost all of them have same origin. A very small, tiny fraction have a different origin. And so that's expected because in this case, it is max length invalid. So what happened is that the owner is routing both the less specific and the more specific, and they forgot to put the right max length, or they forgot to create an additional ROA for the more specific. Now you can drill down on the right side just for the 40 of them which have a different origin AS, and it turns out that out of that, 26 of them go to the transit provider of the different OS. So it's the same path, it's just going to one AS above, which is the transit provider. So this one, so you can look through the next 3 slides, which drill down deeper into what happens when there is AS mismatch or max length and AS mismatch. So let's move on from those. So the next few slides, next couple of slides are about the implementation considerations. Here, we got some inputs from Jeff. Thank you for that. And I would request Jeff to help me out here in case I'm not saying something right. On the list, Jeff had an objection about the algorithm that is currently written in the draft. And over there, we said something about like changing things in the local pref. And Jeff's suggestion to me, so what you're seeing in this picture is that you have edge ribbons, you have the origin validation checks, then you go through the decision process, shortest path, etc. Then you put stuff into the local rib. And after that only, if I understand Jeff's suggestion correctly, only after that you bring in the deserve policy. And as you select the routes to go into the fib or the edge routes, that is the time when you check for the less specific. More specific is invalid. Is there a less specific that's either valid or not found? If so, then you put it in the fib or in the edge routes. So that's the implementation, conceptual implementation. Then you have to be careful about what happens when things change. So when a valid or not found route is added, at that point of time, you have to check if there are more specific prefixes in the fib or edge routes subsumed by the route prefix. And if those more specific prefix routes are invalid, then you need to remove them from the edge routes or the fib because the valid not found route that's newly added covers it. So likewise, you also have to look at 2 other conditions. I'll not explain those, but those 2 other conditions are when a valid or not found route is withdrawn, again, you have to perform checks. Or when there are changes in the RPKI state, that's once again when you need to do the to redo the checks. So that's the high-level conceptual implementation. Once we decide that we have some support for this proposal, we can work out the details. Finally, this is my last slide. So here we have, what we have is a gradual hardening of the stick. Today, invalid routes are not dropped. That is early adoption, and we do our best to, operators do their best to notify invalid, educate, and encourage adoption among their customers. Then we apply, as we go into actually making it real, we use a soft stick, that is the deserve policy. And here we are assuring the negligent user who has not created a ROA that for the more specific you didn't create a ROA, but for the less specific you have a ROA, it's valid. We are routing it to the less specific, so your traffic is not being dropped on the floor. Like we saw in the scenarios, you're getting the traffic, so that's during moderate adoption. Once again, continue the efforts for notifying the invalids to the customer and educate them. And finally, the hard stick is always drop invalid. That would be in mature adoption. Thank you. Okay.
Cool. Can we go 1 slide back? So, Keyur Patel, 1 more slide back, please. Right. So, as an implementer, would you ever get a request from your provider that says, if I figure out that I really want to drop invalids, right? Or I want to implement your algorithm, I want to do it at the point where I don't even consider decision process. I may want to optimize that. Would that require a change in the draft?
Oh, right now, draft is 0 individual.
Right.
So it will go through many changes,
Good.
no doubt.
So I suggest you provide that flexibility. That's all I was saying. And then the second question I have is, how many levels do you expect, assuming there is an attack, and assuming the attack happens in a way that someone announces more specific, and there are a bunch of less specifics that are announced. So say there was a /24 followed by /16 followed by /8. How many levels should you recurse through to say when to stop? And the answer may be
recurs as much as you can. Okay, one is good.
Yeah, so if you find, you look up the prefix tree from more specific to less specific. As soon as you find the first one that is less specific, I mean, there's less specific that is valid or not found, you route to that.
And one last question.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you're not counting in this check a default 00 as a valid overlay.
No, I don't think so, no.
So Warren Kamari, no hats. So let's say that so let's say I end up with an invalid /24 and there's currently a covering /20 that is, not found or something. I then hide the /24 because it's currently invalid. When the covering route goes away and then comes back, it sounds like I have a fair bit of work to do. Yep. It just, the amount of work sounds, okay.
John Scudder. That was a good point, by the way. So I just wanted to point out that in your, taxonomy of, different network cases, I think your second one showed, a multi-homing case, and then your third one showed a prefix portability case. And I just want to point out that, generally the point of multi-homing is also prefix portability. What I mean by that is if my link to my primary provider goes down, the whole point of multi-homing is that I think my traffic is still going to get delivered to me along my second path. But in your example, what you showed was, well, the multi-homing doesn't really work, but it's okay because the primary path still
You're
exists.
saying this link could go down?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then it becomes the following example. So
If this link goes down and this is withdrawn, then all you are left with is the invalids. And between the invalids, you don't
no,
have, correct?
You had I guess the example is you have a multi-homed customer, but
Yeah, this one maybe?
show me your prefix portability example. The one where you said, oh, Jeff brought up this other example.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay. So basically that example, but the customer isn't moved, the customer is multi-homed.
Yeah.
And so that dotted line is not really dotted, it's solid. So that's extremely similar to the slide we were just looking at a minute ago. Now the dotted line gets broken because, a squirrel chews through the fiber.
Just one second. Oh, also, there's only 2 minutes left. I think the sound out of the room might have dropped out. So
Should we all stop talking until the audio comes back?
I'll stop this bus right now.
Or I could count backwards from 100.
Yeah. I'll see if we can chase down.
Anyway, do you get my point? That
Yeah.
essentially in this case. Okay.
Just check.
So all right. So both are solid lines, and this one goes away. This one goes away.
Yeah.
And he's still announcing. All right, right.
He's still announcing the aggregate. So that guy, then gets no service.
And at the same time, I mean, right, okay, he gets.
You could argue that, oh, well, that's okay because, for the reason you give at the bottom,
Mhm.
but it still, means that, and there's a whole bunch of business ramifications to this then about multi-homing and so on that it's probably, Chris's beeper beeped, so we don't have time to go into it. But I think that we can't just sort of, easily dismiss the problem.
Okay. So we'll
Mailing
dig
list
deeper.
conversation, and
Mhm.
there's less than a minute, so be quick and get quick.
Job Snyder's, NTT Communications. I want to emphasize that the reason we're looking into this is because there currently is zero deployment of origin validation. I am one of 5 networks that does origin validation, so we're performing really poor. And I see this as an experiment, a thought experiment perhaps. How can we roll into this and incrementally start protecting groups of people that created the correct ROA and do the correct route announcements, and perhaps not yet offer benefits to people that have misconfigurations or at least try not to punish those. And I'm fully aware that this will be probably be quite computationally expensive, and that alone may, prevent this from ever materializing in the real world. So studies will need to be done, like what is the actual cost of this, because I'm very concerned about resources. But if people have other ideas how to roll into origin validation, this is a good time to step forward.
Doug Montgomery, NIST. One quick point I'd like to make to John's point, right, is that you always have a problem if you're multi-homing and only creating ROAs for one path, at least in these kinds of examples. So you need to be consistent.
There is no more time. We're all done. Next up.
Thank
You
you.
can talk about this in the mailing list, of course, please. Magic. How does this work? Tim.
Okay, hi. There is a draft called API Signed Object for TEL, Trust Anchor Locator. Does this work?
Now.
Yes. So very quick reminder how this all works. We have the Trust Anchor Locator file, which essentially contains a bunch of URIs, or at least one, and a, let's say, fingerprint of the key of the Trust Anchor certificate. This gets either shipped by default or configured by users in the relying party software. It then fetches a certificate, validates it, and that it matches the fingerprint, let's say, and then from there on, it can commence validation. So what's the issue here? Well, sometimes new URIs may be applicable. I was going to talk about HTTPS in TELS next, so that's a potential use case. But there may also be a need to have a new key. In particular, in our case, we use hardware security modules to protect our key. But currently, we're kind of locked into one vendor, and it would be nice if we could change at some point. If you need to communicate a new TEL, then, well, it's pretty undefined at the moment. They need to be installed by hand. You could maybe do a hack and ship new TELs with a validator and figure out where you're using this old thing, then I'll replace it, but it's a bit, dodgy. And it's hard to reach the deploy base and get people to do this. So why talk about this now? I thought I'd put this one up. To me, this is quite important, not super urgent. We don't have a problem right now, but it's only not urgent until it becomes urgent. So I think we should have a good discussion about this. Also, given the issues with the DNS keys, I think also show that it's good that we can tackle this early. So what is in this draft? It covers planned rules. So we are planning to use a new key. Planned new publication points. But it doesn't cover unplanned rules. Well, like I tried to say in the slide about, I think this is important, not urgent, but we should start talking about this. I'm really open to suggestions, like nothing in this document is cast in stone. I took up the edit token on this because I think it's important enough that we start a discussion, but I'm really open to other ways that this can be done. Let's get it right. So that being said, this is what the document says now. For a planned rule, a trust anchor should set up a new key first and publish all the objects that go with it, and then publish a new signed TAL object. Relying parties who see this must use it immediately, and the TA, well, that's what the current document says, must still operate the old key for at least 24 hours. Not sure that that's entirely necessary if relying parties have to switch over immediately anyway. But then the third stage is retire the old key. But if you can, leave a pointer to where the new key is. So if people arrive later, they can still find their way. Then publication, adding a new publication point is relatively easy because you just need to publish the certificate first, and then you can have a trust anchor locator that references it. RPs must, this was done for consistency, always use this new trust anchor locator immediately. But I have already found the certificate, so in this case, it would be the next run that this thing becomes available, let's say. For removal, well, if you remove the only location that a trust relying party has, then of course things will break. So it kind of assumes that you didn't do that. But you're trying to phase out one of multiple. Yeah, the thought here is that, okay, continue to operate this location for a while at least. And the document currently says 24 hours, but yeah, I'm not sure that that's the right value, to be quite honest. Then, well, issues. There were some issues. Well, first of all, there's a double encoding issue, like the content of the tell is encoded whilst it doesn't have to be double encoded, let's say, as base 64. That's a minor issue. There's magic times in here, like I mentioned. Not sure that we really need them and what the value should be. Everything is immediate to me. Somebody suggested, I think it was Tom, that maybe you want to plan ahead and say, I plan to use this new thing 2 months from now. To me, that doesn't seem like to me, I'm not sure that I agree with the use case there. It seems simpler to me to just do it. But it's a point of discussion. Another point of discussion is, should we actually try to cover unplanned rules? And if so, then it may be a good idea to use the same mechanism both for planned rules and unplanned rules, because then we just have one way of doing things. Why unplanned rules? Well, if I look at our case, we do use our hardware security model to protect our keys, so the chance that people steal the key is very, very small. But you can still lose access to the key. And if you had multiple keys, then you could store them in different locations and maybe reduce that risk. But the expenses, and let me go here, is that it would complicate the, well, the scenario that I thought of, at least, how you could do this is more complicated than a simple planned role, let's say. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Are you really, making things better here? But okay, that said, what I had in mind was you could have the current key define a new key. It's not actually being used, let's say, but it has the power to say the old key is no longer in use. You would need a slightly more complicated object, I think, than a simple tell for this, because at least the way I see it, you need to then communicate what is current, what is future, and what is old. So this is not in the current document, but it was discussed or emailed it to the list. So again, I'd like very much to have feedback on this. Which brings me to this slide, which says most of the things I've already said. So future changes. Do people need it? Do people see a use case? I think we can look into it. But again, to me, it seems that it's easier from a relying party's implementation perspective that we just deal with it when it's ready, and don't keep track of when we need to do something in the future. Times, what should we use? And yeah, importantly, cover unplanned key roles. Should we go there? Is the use case strong enough to have potentially more complicated ways of doing this? And I think that's it. Yes. So any questions or comments, welcome.
Rob Ostine. couple comments. One, the main reason for doing pre-publication in most of these sorts of protocols is to try to be ready for some kind of unplanned key roll. It's basically just because you can't do it once the events happen, basically rebooting. Second thing, in terms of your magic numbers, one way to think about it in terms of are these numbers sane, or rather in terms of what the protocol is saying, is say you're keeping the 24 hours, which sounds aggressive to me, but for purpose of discussion, pretend you're keeping the 24 hours. What happens if somebody's been asleep for 2 weeks? How badly does this break? Does it just magically recover? Are they screwed? You know, just go through the whole thing that way.
Yes. Yeah, I agree, but I wasn't entirely clear on the position on planned rules that you mentioned. Sorry for being a bit dense here, but are you saying it's something we should cover or we should not cover?
I didn't actually express an opinion
No.
on that, which is why you can't tell. However, that said, I know you've been looking for an excuse to use JSON for the towel for years now.
Actually, on the list I proposed XML because it's consistent with how we do it
In some
elsewhere.
respects, it's easier for this because of the base 64. I think we need to work through what we're going to do if we do have unplanned. Because it's not like the problem goes away because we refuse to think about it, unfortunately.
Well, I think one thing that would be useful is to hear from you and D as well as relying party implementers. How much cost would this incur on relying party software if you have to do all these checks all the time? Another way to think about it is would operators of trust anchors actually, do they see the need for doing this, or are they confident that using an HSM is protection enough, let's say, and having good backups? But the third question is also, does the technical community think that that's good enough? So there's all these questions here, and I don't really have the answer to all of them. But yeah, maybe we should leave it at that, and then hopefully spark up some more discussion on the list. Right. This one should be easy. Famous last words. HTTPS and trust anchor locators, tells. So it's essentially just this. It said have one or more rsync URIs. Now the document says a new version has been written with my name and George Markelson's name on it. I reached out to authors of the original RFC actually. I don't think people there were felt that they needed to be on the offer list, but they're welcome to, because the change is actually minor. It just says you can use HTTPS now, essentially. You could also use only HTTPS, the way it's written. So one or the other. Why? It's easier to host these things reliably, and it's easier to fetch. You don't need to start up an external command like rsync. But there's libraries. One thing I'd like people to look at is the HTTPS consideration section. This is similar to what we've done in the Delta protocol. TLS validation is, well, I would say definitely somewhat useful, but people also mess it up. And because you get this object and you have a fingerprint, you can actually verify that this certificate is valid. So there is object security there. So the advice is essentially do this, warn in case it doesn't validate, and but use it anyway. And it leaves it entirely to local policy of the relying party software to then decide, okay, maybe I want to try another URI that works without warnings. So that's one thing to think about, I think. But other than that, I feel this is probably pretty much done. And yeah, we'd probably even go for last call very soon, unless people feel a need to discuss more on this. So that's, I don't have a question slide here, but consider done question mark, and please review considerations as my questions. Any comments? And the considerations as written. Can you please, that it says to be removed later, and then it has a suggested text. If people are all fine with that text, then I'm fine with it. Okay.
Please email the list asking for adopt or shipping.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Now the fun bit. Yes. I think we have the uncoolest name of all the validators out there. By far. But I honestly couldn't think of a better one. Sorry. We've been working on a new version of our RPKI validator. Some reasons why. Stability, maintainability from a software point of view, because the old tool was written in Scala, and whilst I still think that's a pretty nice language, it's quite hard to have find people who can maintain it. Redundancy and deployment is something we want to look at. We want to reduce the memory footprint somewhat because the old one was keeping everything in memory. And we also want to look at the deployment and update model. So features, it's pretty similar to the current one. We have export of ROAS in CSV and JSON that's compatible with the earlier version. We have added support for router certificates and RPKI RTR version 1 that also includes router certificates. We were not doing incremental updates earlier, but we have added this now. We are working on Slurm, so that's the local exceptions, if you will. You can say ignore a certain prefix or router certificate and add my own. That's in progress. We have a UI. It's completely unsecure, kind of by design, because we figured, well, if you want to secure it, just put a proxy in front of it that, is following the latest and greatest in how to do HTTPS, etc. But if we put that in our software, it will become harder to maintain. I don't think we can compete with Nginx or Apache or things like that. API, the UI uses an API, the API itself as well, and it's browsable. You can, well, it's self-documented and you can try it out. Command line interface, I'm afraid we won't have time to build that right now, but if anybody is willing to do work in this space, we'd be very happy to work with you. Yeah, so that's features. Architecture. So what I meant redundancy is we kind of assume that you would be running one validation engine, so that doesn't share state between, let's say, two instances of a validator. But the way we've looked at the RPKI RTR thing is it's a separate deployable at the moment. It uses the API. It keeps local state in case the validator is unavailable, for example, for an upgrade, and you can have multiple. Well, you can have scripts using the API. A little more on this internal validation versus patching. This is where we spent quite a bit of work in the internals. Is we have a more clear separation now. We always had a local cache, but now we've really separated the functions to become asynchronous. So that means that if a repository is unavailable, our validation process isn't blocked. But it does add a bit of overhead when we first start. We need to first try all the repositories under a tree, and we discover them kind of by doing incremental validations. And so there may still be things that we haven't tried yet. So as long as we haven't tried all the repositories in a tree, the trust anchor is marked as pending, and RPKI RTR doesn't include the results for it. Then, as soon as we do try them, if they fail, they fail. But at least we've tried. Also, well, a screenshot of one monitoring page. We now list the repositories explicitly as well, in addition to any validation issues with objects in the tree. Hopefully, this will help debugging issues a bit better. Known issues, because this is still in beta. Reporting on pending trust anchors is still somewhat confusing. If you start up if you download the tool and start running it, it needs to build up state initially, and it's kind of reporting the object that it has found, even though it's not ready yet. So that's something we want to look at in the UI. Local exceptions are not completely finished, but we are looking at that and making good progress. There is no user interface for trust anchor management, so adding new trust anchors. There is an API for this. This may remain a feature. What we may actually do is that we just have a small script that exemplifies how you can use the API to upload a trust anchor locator. So please let me know what you think. It's all available on GitHub, so you can create issues there. You can talk on the list. You can talk to me personally. Everything works. We're quite dedicated to fixing any bugs and issues, but we're careful about features. We want to keep this thing maintainable, and that's also why we want to keep the feature set quite minimal. For deployment, we currently support RPMs for CentOS 7. That's because we use that internally. It's not because everybody should use it, of course, but we want to do what we can, let's say. I made a Docker image as well based on this. That might be useful for some people, and there's a generic build. So that based on that, you could also figure out how to deploy it in other distributions. If people are interested in making distributions for certain platforms and they have some authority in those distributions, then again, we'd be very happy to work with you. And that's it, I think. So, yeah.
Rob Austin again. I had one question that's sort of relevant to IETF as opposed to just as a cool implementation. When I was implementing the client side of RDP and using RIPE's enormous database as the server side, I noticed very, very different behavior that I had to cope with in my implementation in terms of the difference between full transfer and incremental transfer. I mean, the database behavior was totally different. If you had any implementation experience in that area, that sort of thing that you came across while doing this, that would probably be useful for the worker group to know.
Right. No, I'm not sure that we encountered that, but let's have a chat later.
Hi, team. Dima from ZDS. First of all, I'd like to give you a suggestion in terms of how to name your software. Maybe you could rearrange every word of the name of software. Maybe you can get a funny initials. Well, given that the validation reconsidered the amended procedure for certificate validation, path validation is going to be an FFC. So may I inquire to how would you do that? You didn't mention in your slides.
No.
And as far as I observe, there are two methods at hand. One is to waiting for the OpenSL to support it, the new OID. And the other would be, well, let's just rewrite a separate module to support this function. Okay.
So support of validation reconsidered. We had it in the 2.x series of the validator as a global config, because this was before the time that we discussed that a object identifier on certificates would be used. We haven't done it in this one yet. It wouldn't be difficult for us to do it, but we were waiting to see where the standard goes and the discussion about how it should be deployed, because the moment that we would publish a certificate with a new OID in it, things will break. So we need to have a discussion there. And yeah, one open issue there is if you use these new OIDs, can you use a mix or can you not use a mix? What do you need to validate? It's not entirely clear yet. The document as specified basically says this is how it could work in various cases. But we need to have that discussion, I think, about, what is an acceptable deployment model here before we do the RP code, because otherwise we may end up redoing it. So I don't really see the point in going ahead of that. But that being said, it's very easy for us to do this. We are not relying on OpenSSL. It's all a local implementation. We already keep track of the, let's say, the validated resource set concept, because in our mind, any certificate in the chain can use the inherit attribute, let's say. So we already keep track of what resources go with a certificate, and changing this to something where we say, if there's an overclaim, accept the intersection, is not difficult for us. So that's not on the critical path.
Thank you.
All right, Dima, you're up.
Where was that? Hello, everyone. I'm Dima from CDS. As one of the authors of this document, I would like to brief the update. Before touching upon the very subject, I would like to reiterate the motivation of the reason why we do this. Are we suggesting that implementer skip reading all those RPK related documents? Absolutely no, because anyone who wants to comprehend this new technology can't be exempted from reading the necessary documents. Actually, I see this document could serve as a manifest for all necessary RP functions. If I remember correctly, there is RFC 6434 IPv6 node requirements. I believe we are doing the similar things. And then we believe implementers should know more than what RP requirements are, because the implementers need to know how to reflect all the functions of RP as they are making software design. So I really think this argument could make this work more necessary. So that's clarification of the motivation. Moving along to the overview. This document, well, the current version is 0.1. It's the update for the first time since it was adopted. And we also expect this document to be an informational IFC that provides a single reference point for requirements for reliant party software for use in the RPK. Here come the changes. Above all, we add the RPK repository Delta protocol when we mentioning the synchronization mechanism supported by target repositories. And second, we have made the reference to RFC 6487 more detailed with the new granularity of sections. So not just telling people to go to the RFC to search for what they want. And we also add a paragraph that indicates the amended procedure to handle accidental overclaiming as specified in the validation reconsider document, which, by the way, is about to be RFC. In last version of this document, we left the way RP handle stale or invalid manifest as a TBD, and it has been complemented like this. We also add the security consideration sections by emphasizing both backup and secure transport of the validated cache. Okay, that's all. This photo was taken by the to author Dr. Stephen Kent recently in India. Well, I can tell from the tiger eye contact, the big cat is hungry for questions. Thank you.
Any
So no question?
No questions?
No question. This cat won't be fed up.
Okay. Off we go. Thank you very much, everyone. And like I said earlier, twice or 3 times, please, much of the discussion should go on the mailing list. Oh, we had the whole thing about transport security. Let me stand up. Leave the cat up. We can leave the cat up. All right. So Jeff's presentation, Jeff's not here, I don't think. Great. We can talk about him. He won't even know. Jeff's presentation basically said, as an implementer of a protocol, they have a lot of fun making their cool protocol do cool things, and then they go to the IESG, and the security AD slams his hammer down like Thor and says, "Hey, dummy, you have to protect this." And everybody either goes, "I don't know how to do that," or they do what we did for Cider and say, "You have an awesome answer. It's called TCP/AO, but nobody knows how to do it. So we're just going to do BGP MD5 and we're just going to do MD5 and until something better comes along." I think we actually said use SSH, but anyway, the point of the matter is, like, you can create your own fictional thing to do that, which seems not constructive. You can talk about using BGP MD5 and get the Thor hammer again from Stephen Farrell or his replacement, Ecker. Super awesome. That's right. He's more like the Flash, I guess. So anyway, I guess Jeff's requesting that somebody put some time into sort of making a matrix of, I have a protocol, it's TCP or UDP. I care about identification of the far side and some cryptographic assurance that the packet didn't get messed with on the way. Then I should use this or I should use this based on what protocol you're using. If you want to also get confidentiality, then you would have to do something else, like say IPsec or TLS, and then some information about how to actually implement those things as in operations, and maybe some pointers to existing code would be great. This seems like a good idea to me. I don't necessarily think it's Cider ops work. In fact, it's probably a little more like grow work, but at least to write the document. But I would like, does anybody else think this is worthwhile? Perhaps again, not here. Or why does it not matter, Rudiger?
Warren Kumari with no hats. Yeah, if we don't do this or someone in the site doesn't do this, the standard answer is just going to be use TLS for everything. And unless you want all your routers doing TLS for everything, we might want to do something about it. Or just use TLS.
Job Snyder's NTT. I think it's definitely worthwhile to try and profile the different use cases and applicability security concerns. But I'm also interested in improving the BGP protocol specifically in an operator-friendly way. An analogy would be when we SSH into a host, we want to see the fingerprint, we say yes or no, and it's cached, and forever that material can be used to securely do stuff. And TLS is not the right solution here, but something lightweight, something that is transferable from device to device, something that doesn't require operators to jump through hoops to share secrets, something that is not encrypted on the wire, so we can still debug it. That would have my interest. So I think there's perhaps multiple initiatives that could flow from this.
Just to clarify, it sounds like what you're saying is the matrix of what to do if you have this or that problem or this or that protocol is interesting to you.
Yes.
Thank you.
John Scudder, sounds like a problem for carp. Oh, wait. As Rudiger points out.
Fortunately, carp is a fish, so the tiger's happy.
Yeah, carp is a fish, and it started to smell bad, so it died. Or maybe it happened in the other order. I'm not sure. Yeah, so I also would like to see this work get done somewhere, because obviously I'm one of the people that gets the big headaches when Thor bangs his hammer down at silver hammer on my head. Yeah, am I offering to do it? I did hear some threats about a design team when I was in SAG, and I neither run screaming nor did I raise my hand and volunteer, but there's a whole lot of people who think a whole lot of problems are the problem to solve. So as much as I despise problem statements, that's probably the first piece of work to get done, is to just figure out which problem or problems it is that we want to solve, and then we can decompose it from there.
Thank you.
Russ Housley. So I also was in SAG, and this all started when I was security area director, so that was a long time ago. And then when I was IETF chair, I got the routing ADs, the ops ADs, and the security ADs together, and we bashed out this. And this led to TCP/IO and CARP and a whole bunch of things. And it's like, please tell me why this is different, because I feel like I was the cheerleader to round all those people up and get those specs developed. And as far as I can tell, the only thing that's changed is we came up with a more efficient MAC function since then. As you know, right now that TCP/IO specifies HMAC SHA-1, which is getting a little long in the tooth. But okay, we could use GMAC. Okay, we got to specify an OID and we're done. Is that really it?
Actually, it would be nice if something actually had TCP/IO in it.
Exactly. There's one implementation, right?
Where?
And at Juniper somewhere. But it was probably Draftbonica still.
Not anymore.
Right. So anyway, my point is, if there's really a need, the people are here to do the work and have.
Okay, thanks. I would also just note that I think we're into time for cookies or some business, but I'll check while you're talking, John.
Not according to my calendar. My calendar says we have another half hour for this room, but
What the heck?
I mean, I'm perfectly happy to have you adjourn right now. That's fine. I was just getting up to say that I could answer Russ's question, which may or may not have been rhetorical. But I'm not sure what your intent is with raising the topic. Like, are we discussing this topic in the room until we're done, or what?
Sort of, yes. Sort of making sure I'm not crazy, but
Randy Bush. The problem with MD5 is it solves the problem we have. Add 4808 and we have roll. We have MD5 because we were being attacked and got TCP resets. Currently, nothing is successfully attacking MD5. When that happens, maybe we'll go with our checkbooks and beat on the heads of the vendors, and they will give us TCP/IO. And the moment TCP/IO doesn't exist, it's a fantasy. Why are we spending floor time on it?
you're in the way.
This is new.
He was too
No.
polite to say it.
Tom Petch. This is the third time I've heard TCP/IO this week. The other two were the same presentation, saying when are we getting TCP/IO, and the presenter said he conducted. Was talking to a number of working groups. If I can read out my list: IDR, PIM, PCE, BEST, PALS, RTGWG. I wondered why Sidrops wasn't on his list. So there is quite a lot of activity on why aren't we doing TCP/IO, and is it the right answer, and do we need a better SHA 256 or something? But yes, there are other people interested around the IETF.
Those were all protocol groups. This is an operations group. We can ask. This is part of the reason I had brought the topic up is if it's something that operations people think that they need, not necessarily AO per se, but if they need this functionality, they need to speak to their vendor and maybe going to them and saying, here's some paperwork you should read, please make it work for me.
But the presentation was saying we did a survey, we went and spoke to the vendors, we went and spoke to the operators, and this is the answer we got back. So
people are sometimes crazy.
Yes.
Totally agree. And There are lots of instances where having security of your routing protocol in flight is important to me. And I run a not small network. I also have customers that are going to peer with me over the friggin' internet, which is crazy.
Yeah, nobody should do that. John Scudder again. So, okay, to answer Russ's question, which I think he asked sort of, which was, you know, what the hell do you want from me? Are the algorithms in there not making you happy? Did you want a different algorithm? The answer is no. I mean, this isn't what Stuart actually said, but I think it's what he should have said. And this is kind of what Jeff said at SAG also, is it's not a technology problem primarily. We've got all the technology spec'd. The specs are pretty much fine as far as we know. It's an economic problem, which is kind of what you were saying about checkbooks. And it's a process problem, which is kind of what Randy was saying about MD5 is fine. It would be nice not to get, you know, have to have the same damn problem argument over and over and over again every time we send up something to the IESG. So to me, at least, as much as anything, this, you know, never-ending series of discussions in different working groups about AO is not about the technology of AO at all. It's about what does the IETF do when reality is over here and desire is over there. And, you know, instead of having a hissy fit every single time someone sends over a draft, can we have one huge hissy fit and just get it out of our systems and then, you know, be done?
So Warren Kumari, largely following up from that, yeah, I mean, either better security or a good answer on why we don't need security for this. But having the same fight again and again and again is getting old. Sure. But I mean, we see it often where a draft comes up and they're like, TCP MD5, are you nuts? And then we go through this thing again on what it's there for, and yeah. I like one thing that I get.
Come on, Brian.
That's okay.
Well, kind of at the time we did the router RPKI protocol, we actually did a dance on, well, okay, the politically correct answer to security unfortunately wasn't available. And we did a dance, and that delayed the whole thing for some months or even more. The enthusiasm for kicking that stuff off from here is very limited. And that's actually somewhat a different situation from LDP or BGP, where the MD5 deprecation happened post-fact. I suspect there are plenty of other protocols that are in very similar situation like we are here. And yes, next time, if something is deprecated, we really have to ask the leadership that they take care that there is running code.
Brian Wise, Cisco. So I was involved in the TCPO as some of the rest of you were, I think. We did that as a response to needing to replace an algorithm. We did that. I think game over. We just need to get it implemented. Okay. And I'm sorry, as a vendor, I have to tell you that you have to tell us apparently to implement it, and that you'll buy stuff. That it just seems to be the way it works. I do what I can internally, and okay. So it seems like we've understood the problem, we solved the problem, we just don't have an implementation. Why should we have the implementations? I think it's because we wanted to be prepared for when there were problems, and we wanted to be able to react quickly. Okay. At the moment, we know what the problem is, we know how to solve it, we'll react whenever we have implementations. That's not as good.
Rob Alstein, this isn't really about AO. It's worse than that. I don't know if you remember what we originally did with the RPK router protocol. It was going to be over SSH, just plain old SSH. We gave up on that because, well, we couldn't find anybody who implemented the server side for this or the client side for that. So we said, okay, we looked at this, we looked at that, we looked at TLS, we looked at AO, we looked at MD5. It turns out the intersection of the things people were actually willing to support was unencrypted TCP full stop, which is what people are using now. Okay. Still, right? This didn't go anywhere, right? That's still all anybody can use, because for anything you name, someone doesn't implement their side of it because people don't care.
Job Snyder's NTT. As to implementing TCP authentication options, I'm not so sure if the operator community in the BGP world actually wants that. If you talk about interdomain eBGP, people really, really hate exchanging shared secrets. It leads to, it's not a technology problem. It's just people are sometimes ridiculous about this stuff. What I'm saying is TCP/AO does not solve the key sharing. So if we come up with something that, and what I would also like to observe, everything that has been proposed so far, TCP MD5, TCP/AO, MACsec, IPsec, SSH, TLS, DTLS, it's all protecting the outside envelope. And I feel we have not yet explored enough of protecting opportunistically by doing it inside the protocols themselves. But that is, of course, a big discussion.
Randy Bush. Brian, what I'm hitting you over the head with my checkbook for is proper implementations of origin validation. It's broken on your routers. Don't tell me you want me to beg for TCP/AO. This is Sidrops. Give me the protocol.
John Scudder, since Warren volunteered me for some design team that hasn't been formed, I volunteered Job. Yeah, that there were several beats there before that the wait what came back. So I think you're right that making it actually operationally useful might be a good idea. I think that as far as I can tell, and maybe Russ can opine about this, AO is designed such that if you had a way to manage keys that wasn't stupid, you could just plug it into AO. So it would be valid to have the AO implementation. It would be valid to have good key management. It's a decomposable problem. We can attack both pieces.
Brian Wise. So first point on, yes, the key management, or how you would key management. So I was also co-chair of CARP, and we actually had specifications, draft specifications, anticipating that people would want to stop using pre-shared keys and instead using some kind of automated key management protocol. There was not enough interest to continue, so that died on the vine. That could be resurrected somewhere if there actually was enough interest. The other thing I wanted to mention is, I think one reason to talk about it in an ops area, maybe not this one, is what I was hearing, I think, little bits of in SAG, is that there's issues or concerns about keychains, or how would you do orderly key rollover, and I think that's a solved problem that needs to be just described. At least that's my opinion. I could be wrong, and I should be told if that's the case. Maybe there's an operational document to be written that describes how to put this all together.
Thank you. I think the end of that is not here. Still think about how to put a matrix together, and then Job is going to specify how to do BGP with some better security. All right. With communities. There's nothing else on the agenda. I actually thought we were running a lot shorter than we were. So, okay, or a lot longer, I mean. See you next time in Montreal. Bring your French.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe.
It's funny, you know?
14 years that I was at Cisco, I never heard key management was an issue. And I said to make sure it's truthfully that ultimately is now in your kind of.
Did you also run right before?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.